The cameras were rolling, the guests were watching, and then, the moment no one could believe. At a glittering royal charity gala, Catherine, Princess of Wales, extended her hand toward Queen Camilla with grace and a soft smile. But instead of returning the gesture, Camilla turned away. No handshake, no eye contact, just deliberate, public dismissal. Gasps echoed. Staff froze. But before the shock settled, Prince William stepped in, with a single sentence that shook the monarchy. What he did next wasn't just protective, it was historic. And in that instant, the royal power dynamic shifted forever. A royal room turns ice cold. It was supposed to be a night of elegance. A charity gala held in Westminster, glittering with jewels, flashing with cameras, filled with polished smiles and royal handshakes. But what happened as Princess Catherine approached Queen Camilla stopped time. Catherine, graceful as ever, stepped forward with an outstretched hand and a soft smile. The photographers leaned in. The crowd held its breath. And then, Camilla turned away. No handshake, no eye contact, just a cold shoulder delivered in front of hundreds of guests and a sea of lenses. The air changed, guests gasped, aides froze. The moment wasn't just awkward, it was explosive. The monarchy, so carefully choreographed, had just cracked in real time. And everyone saw it. Behind the scenes, aides scrambled. The footage had already been caught. The cameras didn't miss a second, and neither did Prince William. He had been standing Middleton just steps away, mid-conversation with a donor, when he turned and saw it. Catherine's hand hanging mid-air. Camilla walking away. The whole room watching. And in that instant, something changed. William didn't hold back. He walked directly to his wife, placed a reassuring hand on her back, and turned to face Camilla. "My wife deserves the same respect my mother once did." His voice was calm, controlled, but sharp enough to cut through every whisper. The room fell silent. Even Camilla, poised and seasoned, looked stunned. The message wasn't just for her, it was for everyone. Because that single sentence, spoken without shouting, without drama, marked a turning point. Not just in the evening, but in the monarchy. And as William stood beside Catherine, steady and unwavering, it became clear. This wasn't just a royal snub. It was the beginning of a reckoning. William's quiet explosion. Prince William has always been known for his composure, the calm center of a chaotic crown. But that night, something deeper surfaced, not anger, but protection. He saw what Catherine had endured, the grace she'd shown, the pressure she'd carried silently. And to see her publicly humiliated, he wasn't going to let that slide. "My wife deserves the same respect my mother once did." The weight of that sentence sent shockwaves through the room. Camilla froze. The press, unsure whether to document or disappear, hesitated. Courtiers looked away, but William didn't. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't flinch, because it wasn't rage. It was something worse, controlled disappointment. And that made it land harder than any outburst ever could. Camilla, for a moment, looked smaller. And the public would soon make her feel even smaller still. Within hours, leaked footage of the snub and William's quiet response was everywhere. Social media erupted. The coldest royal moment since Diana's funeral. Kate deserved better. Sar's respect. Kate Camilla's team tried to recover. They blamed poor visibility, lighting, miscommunication. But it was too late. The world had already chosen its side, and it wasn't hers. Insiders revealed something even more telling. After the event, Camilla canceled 2 planned appearances. She was rattled, one aide admitted, more than we've seen in years. And behind palace walls, the tension that had been simmering for over a decade suddenly boiled over. Because this wasn't about one handshake. This was about everything that led to it. Years of tension finally surface. To the public, the royal family has always been a wall of tradition, polished, untouchable, unified. But those who've worked inside know better. Behind every perfectly choreographed balcony wave has been years of silent friction, especially between Queen Camilla and Princess Catherine. Camilla, for all her public charm, has always had a deep discomfort with Catherine's popularity. While Camilla was once vilified and slowly rebuilt her image, Catherine's public love story launched her into admiration almost instantly. And that difference? It never sat well. Insiders say Camilla preferred royal bloodlines, titles earned by birth, not marriage. And Catherine, with her middle-class upbringing, her self-made family, her lack of aristocratic roots, was everything Camilla tried to distance from. The tension was quiet at first, awkward glances, short greetings, but it built over time. Behind-the-scenes stories tell of Catherine being excluded from key planning meetings, last-minute changes to seating arrangements, passive remarks about status and experience. There was always something just under the surface, said one palace source. Camilla felt Catherine hadn't earned it. Catherine never fought back, but she knew. And the tension didn't stop with Kate. Carol Middleton, too, elegant, composed, always gracious, was quietly seen as a threat. At one private family event in 2018, Camilla allegedly made a classist remark that Carol overheard. She didn't react. She didn't cause a scene. But from that day forward, something hardened. What the public saw as a family was really a chessboard. And on that night at Westminster, with one outstretched hand and one public rejection, the game was finally exposed. The Queen Consort may wear the crown, but Catherine had just taken her place in the people's hearts. Carol Middleton, the silent rival. For years, she stood quietly in the background, graceful, polite, always smiling, but rarely speaking. Carol Middleton wasn't just the mother of the future queen. She was a silent force, and Camilla knew it. From the very beginning, Carol represented everything the royal institution wasn't prepared for: independence, modern values, and unshakable family loyalty. While Camilla climbed back from scandal, Carol had built success from nothing. A self-made woman, calm, composed, and impossible to intimidate. Behind palace doors, insiders admit Carol was never fully welcomed. Invitations came late. Seating plans changed. Her suggestions for family events were often lost in the shuffle. And still, she never complained. But that changed in February 2025. On the 6th, just days after the handshake snub, Carol arrived at Buckingham Palace alone. No press, no public agenda, just a handbag, a briefcase, and a silence that said more than words ever could. She was escorted through a private entrance. No cameras captured her walk, but those who were there described the moment as tense, unforgettable, and a reckoning. Inside the briefcase, documents, financial statements, correspondence timelines, emails, patterns of systematic exclusion that couldn't be ignored any longer. She laid it all out, and then she left. Camilla, upon hearing the details, reportedly walked out of the room in tears. One witness said she looked visibly rattled, while another described her as devastated, not because she'd been attacked, but because she'd been exposed. This wasn't gossip. It was a shift in power, and it had been coming for years. Because while Camilla had the crown, Carol Middleton now had something far more dangerous. Proof. The handshake refusal triggers a reckoning. The palace moved quickly. They had to, but they were already too late. The handshake snub had gone viral. Millions had watched it on loop. Every slowed-down frame, every flicker of Camilla's face, every second Catherine's hand lingered in the air, frozen in time. Public sympathy exploded. Commentators called it the most revealing royal moment since Diana walked down the aisle alone. Within 48 hours, hashtags flooded the digital sphere. Respect. Kate the real Queen Camilla. Snub. Camilla's team scrambled. Planned engagements were postponed. Press releases softened. But no spin could undo what had been captured, or what had been felt. And William's words that night, "My wife deserves the same respect my mother once did." They echoed louder with each passing hour. The monarchy's internal crisis became a public reckoning. Polls shifted. Approval ratings changed. Suddenly, the nation wasn't asking where Camilla stood. They were asking why she was standing at all. Inside Clarence House, whispers of instability grew louder. Aides reshuffled. Internal teams were reassigned. And Camilla, the once undisputed queen consort, began fading from view. Because in the court of public opinion, one fact had become inescapable. Catherine wasn't just respected. She was rising. Diana's hidden letter resurfaces. It happened quietly, without cameras, headlines, or fanfare, just days before King Charles's final letter would shake the monarchy. A palace archivist, sorting through an old mahogany drawer in a rarely used room deep inside Kensington Palace, stumbled across something curious. It wasn't in a file. It wasn't labeled. It was tucked beneath old stationery, hidden where only time could find it. A single sealed envelope. Its color was faded cream, but the handwriting was clear, soft, slanted, unmistakable. It carried a presence. "To William," it read on the front. No date, no explanation. But on the back, a signature that froze the room. Diana. The staff member who found it didn't speak. He simply carried it down the corridor, hand shaking slightly, and delivered it directly to William's private aide. There were no formalities, just a quiet knock, a silent nod. And then it was in William's hands. The moment he saw the writing, he stopped breathing. His chest tightened. His fingers trembled. He didn't have to ask who it was. "It's Mum," he whispered, barely audible, like the word itself might disappear if spoken too loudly. He didn't open it. Not immediately. Not even after the room cleared. He simply held it. For hours. From room to room, in total silence, the letter never left his hands. He stared at the seal. He ran his thumb across the ink. It was as if the envelope might speak, if only he stayed still long enough to hear it. Because this wasn't just a forgotten letter. This was a lost heartbeat. A voice he hadn't heard in nearly 30 years, suddenly returned in ink and paper. A message she'd left not for the world, not for the crown, but for him. William didn't tell anyone. He didn't alert press or palace officials. He just slipped it into the inside pocket of his coat, where it rested against his chest, like armor, like memory, like love. As the evening light faded outside the palace walls, he stepped into the dusk alone, not to read it, but to feel it. Because whatever the letter said, however it was meant to be opened, this moment wasn't about answers. It was about presence, about knowing, without question, that she was still with him, not just in legacy, but in a sealed envelope that had waited patiently until he was ready. And as the wind picked up through the palace gardens, William stood still, hand resting over his heart, knowing that he wasn't alone anymore. Anne steps in behind the scenes. She hadn't said much. She didn't need to. Not when her presence alone could shift the tone of a room. But after the now infamous handshake snub, caught on camera, played on every screen, dissected by every commentator, Princess Anne finally made her move. The palace was still reeling. Whispers filled the halls. Staff exchanged glances with unease. Aides scrambled to manage fallout. But while others worried about headlines, Anne focused on the only thing that mattered: stability. She requested a private meeting with Camilla. No press, no PR spin, no courtiers. Just two royal women, bound by duty, divided by conduct, sitting face to face. And then came her line. "We lead by example." That wasn't it. No scolding, no raised voice. Just words spoken with calm finality. The kind that echo louder than any public reprimand. It was vintage Anne, blunt, principled, and unshakably loyal to the institution her mother spent a lifetime upholding. She didn't come to humiliate Camilla. She came to warn her. Because Anne had seen this pattern before. The tension, the missteps, the press hysteria. She'd lived through it during the Diana years. She'd watched the cracks form when personal rivalry got in the way of public duty. And she wasn't about to let history repeat itself, not on her watch. What followed wasn't showy. Anne never needed to parade her influence. But behind palace walls, she moved with purpose. She began mentoring Catherine more directly. What were once polite catch-ups became strategic sessions. Weekly check-ins became near-daily briefings. Garden walks turned into lessons passed down straight from Queen Elizabeth, about presence, posture, timing, tone. She didn't tell Catherine how to outshine anyone. She showed her how to outlast them. She was always the quiet one in meetings, one senior aide shared. Now she's the first person Kate calls after a royal event. And while Camilla pulled back, Anne leaned in. She reviewed briefing notes, gave wardrobe advice, even helped Catherine navigate conversations with foreign dignitaries. Advice that once came from the Queen, now passed to the next generation through Anne. It didn't go unnoticed. Staff talked. Advisors noticed the shift. Even William seemed steadier, more centered, not just because of Catherine, but because Anne was quietly reinforcing the foundation beneath them both. Because when Princess Anne picks a side, she doesn't whisper it. She walks it, owns it, shields it. And now, the woman Queen Elizabeth once called her most trusted compass wasn't just pointing north. She was pointing the entire monarchy in a new direction, one where tradition stood tall, but the future stood stronger. And at the center of it all, Catherine, not just as consort, but as cornerstone. Because Anne hadn't simply come to correct Camilla. She came to crown Catherine in quiet ways only a true royal could. Camilla's fading power, the ripple effects hit fast and hard. What had once been subtle murmurs among palace insiders became unmistakable shifts in energy, presence, and public perception. Camilla's grip on the crown was loosening, and the world could feel it. Where she once walked into royal engagements with practiced charm and visible ease, she now entered rooms late, or avoided them altogether. Her signature sparkle, the rehearsed smile, the carefully timed laughter, began to fade. The air around her changed. Once confident and composed, Camilla seemed suddenly out of place, as if the palace walls were slowly closing in. Public favor was slipping. And it wasn't just tabloid speculation, it was data. Polls revealed a sharp dip in her approval ratings. Online discussions turned from cool indifference to outright criticism. The hashtags told the story in brutal simplicity. #Queen in title. People pick hate. Millions rallied behind Catherine, not because she demanded it, but because she earned it. Inside Clarence House, the anxiety was palpable. Staff changes happened swiftly but quietly. Camilla's longtime communications aides were shuffled to different departments. One of her signature charity events, planned months in advance, was cancelled with no official explanation. Behind closed doors, senior advisors began requesting their meetings not with the Queen Consort's team, but with Catherine's. And that wasn't all. Foreign diplomats and dignitaries who once considered Camilla a vital point of royal contact were now shifting focus. Their invites, their attention, their deference, all pivoting toward William and Kate. It was subtle, but unmistakable. International eyes were beginning to see where the future truly lay. This wasn't some orchestrated palace coup. It wasn't rebellion. It was something far more powerful, an organic shift of loyalty, a slow but steady migration of trust, affection, and authority. And Camilla could feel it. She reportedly grew quieter during briefings, less decisive, less engaged. Where she once fought for presence, she now seemed to withdraw from it. Even longtime allies began to question whether she could weather the storm of public opinion, or whether it was time to step back gracefully. Because the truth was becoming unavoidable. Camilla may hold the title, but Catherine now held the kingdom. The people didn't just admire her, they believed in her. Her strength wasn't ceremonial. It was earned in silence, in sacrifice, in standing tall through every cold shoulder and whispered insult. And now, that quiet strength was reshaping the monarchy, with or without Camilla's approval. And behind the curtain, the message was clear. Crowns can be worn, but not always respected. Catherine didn't wear hers yet, but she didn't need to. She already reigned, in hearts, in homes, and in history that was still unfolding. Kate's Diana moment. For royal watchers, the comparisons were impossible to ignore. A poised woman, beloved by the people, quietly snubbed by the system. It felt familiar, almost hauntingly so. But there was one major difference this time. Catherine wasn't standing alone. The infamous handshake snub had sparked headlines around the globe. Every frame of the moment was dissected. Camilla's turned shoulder, Kate's extended hand, the split-second flicker in her expression. Yet what followed wasn't scandal. It was transformation. Because Catherine didn't falter. She didn't lash out. She simply stood still, graceful, composed, devastatingly powerful. Photos of her reaction lit up the internet. No frown, no flinch, just a cool, calm gaze that seemed to say, "I expected nothing, and I still chose kindness." It was restraint of the highest form, strength disguised as silence. "She's Diana without the tears," one royal commentator wrote, "but with all the power." But this wasn't an attempt to recreate Diana. It was a continuation of what she started. A new chapter in the same legacy, written not in protest, but in presence. Where Diana had once walked into rooms alone, Catherine now walks with William beside her. Where Diana had fought battles behind palace doors, Kate now fights them out in the open, with the public watching and cheering her on. And this time, she has Princess Anne, the monarchy's iron compass, backing her, guiding her, refusing to let her be pushed into the shadows. This is no longer the 1990s. This is a different battlefield, and Catherine is fighting not to escape the firm, but to reshape it from within. She doesn't chase the spotlight, but when it lands on her, she commands it with quiet, unshakable grace. With William's loyalty, with Anne's wisdom, and with the public's growing roar of support, Catherine is no longer the quiet duchess. She's the woman rewriting the rules of royalty. Not with scandal, not with rebellion, but with dignity so strong it speaks louder than any crown. This wasn't the beginning of the end. This was the beginning of something entirely new. A monarchy that listens, a crown that evolves, a legacy that doesn't repeat itself. It rises, and at the heart of it, Kate. Not just Diana's echo, but her answer. Catherine isn't just surviving, she's redefining. When the dust settled, one truth became clear. Catherine hadn't just endured the latest royal scandal, she had transformed it. She didn't retaliate, she didn't complain. She simply continued, stronger, calmer, unshaken. Her schedule picked up pace. Her voice at palace briefings carried more weight. Her bond with the people deepened with every appearance. Meanwhile, Camilla receded, a crown dimming under public pressure. The Queen Consort, once viewed as a survivor of scandal, now stood overshadowed by a woman who'd never needed controversy to earn admiration. And Carol Middleton? Her visit had rewritten the boundaries. Her presence reminded everyone that Kate's strength didn't come from titles. It came from the women who raised her. Now, with Anne beside her and William in full support, Catherine wasn't just stepping forward. She was taking her place, not with speeches or demands, but with a presence that couldn't be ignored and wouldn't be forgotten. Because this wasn't just a survival story. It was the birth of a new kind of queen. Camilla may hold the crown, but after that night, the world knew who carried the people's respect. William stood by Catherine. Anne moved behind her. And Kate? She rose without saying a word. This wasn't royal drama. It was royal reckoning. And the monarchy may never look the same again.